What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Gooner channel, a channel 100% dedicated to the Arsenal, who, as we all know, are by far the greatest team the world has ever seen. And football is back. Not the slow-paced, mind-numbingly boring, pedestrian, international football we've all had to endure, but real football. The best teams in the world, the best players in the world, fighting to the last for a chance to be the league winners of the most coveted league title anywhere in world football. Of course, we have to wait till Sunday, and we take on Everton. Now, on paper, this is a formality, surely. They are rooted at the bottom of the table, have lost both of their previous home games to not particularly convincing opposition, although not terrible. And, well, they've only scored 2 goals in their first 4 games and only got 1 point. But we know different, don't we? This is our bogey ground. We have failed to win in the last 5 visits. And I can't really explain what happened last season or the season before. But we went there for a lunchtime kickoff, having had a great January, beaten Spurs comfortably, beaten Manchester United with a last gasp goal. Mikel Arteta had won 2 Manager of the Months back-to-back. Everything looked poised for us to go there and take the 3 points. And then, well, the game itself happened. And I'm not sure why we lost. Even today, even with all the distance between here and there. I mean, there are some possible reasons. One, that new manager bounce, Sean Dyche coming in. I don't think there's any question we would have beaten the Frank Lampard team. They were woeful. The atmosphere the fans created was electric. And you wouldn't have expected it to be. I mean, if your team is languishing at the bottom of the table, you've just enjoyed Frank Lampard as manager, and they tell you the exciting news that now you've got Sean Dyche to. But, you know, he did a good job for them and he kept them up. Perhaps it was the early kickoff. Perhaps it was travelling up there, I presume, the night before, and it just messed with our endocrine system, just messed with the body clock, or I don't know. I think it's probably more likely that we were a bit complacent. I think a young team that finds itself on top of the table, had done so well for the first half of the season, got 50 points out of 19 games, possibly took it for granted that we were going to win against a really unfancied Everton and weren't really sure what to expect. Definitely a physical game. Hugely physical, but you wouldn't expect anything different from a Sean Dyche team. They mopped up lots of pressure. We had lots of possession, but we didn't really look like scoring. We had 15 shots, but not really. It was a really subpar performance by some of our key players on the day. Whilst defensively we did pretty well, apart from the Tarkowski goal from a corner, typical set piece to concede. But we should have had enough firepower about us to get ahead. Saka played reasonably well. It was an off day for Martinelli. Granit Xhaka didn't quite perform. Odegaard was probably his most disappointing that he'd been at that point of the season. And we definitely weren't scrappy or physical enough or winning our duels. But it wasn't dissimilar to how we performed when we went up the season before and took a 1-0 lead thanks to Odegaard, but just didn't compete. Both times we walked more than we ran, or it seemed that way. It just seemed slow-paced. It seemed not quite the Arsenal that had reached the summit. Something went wrong. And of course, the defeat at Everton was followed by a draw at Brentford that really should have been a win. And a little mini wobble. Everton are not doing any better now than they were when Sean Dyche took over. And certainly we haven't got to worry about the new manager bounce. He's had a difficult time in the transfer window. No, he has brought in Beto, and we will get to the lineups in a minute. It hasn't really gone to plan. Today, of course, all the news is that there will be a takeover of the club. So should we expect a new owner bounce? That'd be just typical, wouldn't it? Perhaps we are cursed at Goodison. Perhaps we can't ever win there again, and that's okay because we're probably not going to play there again after this Sunday. So, how should we expect them to line up? What differences have been made? Well, there are some key differences from last season. Their captain has changed. Coleman has gone. Connor Cody's gone. McNeil won't be playing, and Iwobi left recently to go to Fulham. So let's have a look at the predicted lineups. How are Everton going to line up against us? Well, first of all, Pickford's going to be in goal. That's a given. He may not be England's number one anymore, though, because Ramsdale did come in and do a really good job. I know he didn't have a save to make in a game, but his distribution was really good. Pickford's last game against Sheffield United was a real mixed bag. A really good performance overall, a fantastic double save. Well, I say double save. The first is a fantastic save. The second hits him on the head from a shot. But you have to be there to save him, and he was. But he also scored an own goal. And it was one of those really unfortunate ones where it comes off the post, hits him on the back and goes in. But when your luck's not in, it's not in. He has conceded 8 goals in 4 games so far this season. At right back, Patterson, young, full of promise, has been playing really well this season, but who wants to go up against Martinelli? And on the left, Ashley Young, 38 years old, and he's going to be dealing with Saka. Probably not on his own, but I doubt either of them are going to get a full night's sleep the night before. I'm guessing Braithwaite and Tarkowski will start as centre-backs. Of course, it was Tarkowski who scored the header against us from a corner last season. He's had a really good season so far as well. Idrissa Gueye in that defensive midfield position. But look, ultimately, you would have to expect Everton to be 8 or 9 players behind the ball at all times. Garner, who's been playing really well on the right. Onana and Doucouré in the middle again, with Doucouré slightly ahead. I would guess Danjuma on the left. He scored a goal against Sheffield United. In fact, actually, it's worth saying, Everton have only scored 2 goals this season, both against the Sheffield United, which I think you probably pay out now on bets that they're going to be relegated. But up front, we may see Beto, the new signing, who looked really busy and was responsible for an assist against Sheffield United. Having said that, Sean Dyche did say in his press conference that Calvert-Lewin is fit, and so he might be back in the side. How are Arsenal going to line up? Well, England's number 1, Ramsdale or Raya. Now, Ramsdale hasn't had a good season to now, honestly. He hasn't been performing where we'd expect him to. And when I think about times to change a goalkeeper, though, this is not it. We are going to need some stability because we're cursed up there, right? So we just want a nice, straightforward Ramsdale in goal, White on the right, Zinchenko on the left, and Gabriel and Saliba making that back 5. Our strongest back 5 to this point. Thomas Partey's obviously injured. He's injured for another month, most likely, possibly a bit longer. So Declan Rice will be in the defensive midfield position alongside Odegaard just slightly ahead of him. And who is going to occupy the midfield spot? Now, this is one of the big debates that we can have around this lineup. Obviously, I don't know any better than you. Here are the choices. Do you stick with Havertz, who hasn't been impressive, who is still finding his feet in a new team, even though he has been playing in the Premier League for the last 3 years? Of course, everyone started getting on Kai Havertz back. For some reason, there's a real antipathy towards him, either because he's from Chelsea or it was his sloppy pass that gave Manchester United a chance to score the first goal they did against us and take the lead. And, had a few people taken chances he put in front of them. He'd have a couple of assists. But as we speak, his first 4 games have been, whilst not terrible, not impressive enough. And it feels like people will say that if he keeps him in the side, then Arteta is just being stubborn. Viera, on the other hand, coming on, has had a real impact, has 2 assists to his name this season already, and looks altogether stronger and more up for it than he did last season. The other option, of course, is to put Emil Smith-Rowe in there. Now, I really wanted to see Emil Smith-Rowe come in the midfield. He's the only outfield player apart from Cedric, who is still with us, is in the Champions League squad. That caught a few of us by surprise. But Emil Smith-Rowe and Cedric are the only 2 players who haven't had any minutes at all. I don't know if a game with a team as defensive as Everton, who are prepared to cede possession in the way they will likely be and hit us on the counter, who are as physical as they are, maybe this isn't quite that game. Of those 2, of course, there's always the option of playing Jorginho, but he clearly isn't going to give you as much going forward as Kai Havertz. I think that Kai Havertz at 6'2", physical, wins his duels, We may see an improvement on Xhaka's performance last season from Kai Havertz. And wouldn't it be fantastic for those of us who want to see him do well at Arsenal? Wouldn't it be fantastic if he scored a goal or did something to give us a victory? It is a victory we need on Sunday. I don't really care how many we win by. A 1-0 where we see the game out like we did at Leicester last season would be just fine. So I'm going to go with Kai Havertz alongside Martin Odegaard because I think we're going to be pushed up quite a lot and you need to be tricky in this game. They are going to be well drilled, they're going to be in good formations and they're going to congest the middle of the pitch because they're going to be quite happy for us to try and get crosses in. I would also likely not start Eddie Nketiah as a physical player. Up front, the good news is that Jesus is fully fit. Came on briefly for Brazil against Peru. And, well, this is exactly what we missed last season. You know, Eddie Nketiah was kind of nondescript and didn't really get onto the ball enough. Didn't create chances. Was a little bit predictable. And that's something you can't really say about Jesus. He's tricky. He's got a trick in him. This should be the kind of game that we play him. Martinelli on the left and Saka on the right seems to pick itself week in, week out. But could Trossard be somebody that comes in for Martinelli? Again, a player who had a really good international break with a fabulous goal against Estonia, where he drifts past 3 players, cuts in between 2 defenders and hits it top left bins for an absolute cracker of a goal. He never disappoints. Although it has to be said, the only time he started for us this season, he was hooked just after half-time. It's a tough one. I think if I'm saying what I would do, I would start with Martinelli and if needs be, bring Trossard on. He can play anywhere across the front 3 and in the midfield. So it's probably good to have him on the bench. How are we going to set up to avoid a problem that's becoming one of the reasons that our season hasn't started clicking yet? Teams know how to set up against us, funnel us out wide. We're not going to cross in. We're not going to cross the ball in a lot, which is an area where Everton have been weak this season, down that right side with Ashley Young. Crosses into the penalty area have not been dealt with as you would expect from a Sean Dyche team, but I don't see us really exploiting that. Cutbacks, definitely, but cutbacks into a congested area are less likely to bring goals. I think Arteta is going to have the team fired up as never before. They know that last season's defeat at Everton started a little mini blip, which, when you consider how few points we actually lost the season by and how much more confidence we would have had going into the second half of the season if this Everton result hadn't happened, then I really do think that Arteta is a manager who's learning how to motivate players all the time. We've seen what he does from documentary series like All or Nothing. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in the dressing room tomorrow. This is an important game. I know it's only the 5th game of the season, but you definitely don't want to cede even more ground. Man City are travelling to West Ham, so whilst it's not impossible that West Ham continue their great run of form, it's unlikely. So do we really want to be 5 points behind Manchester City this early in the season? Of course not. What do I think is going to happen? Well, here's what I think is going to happen. I think that it's going to be a physical match again, but this time Declan Rice will make a difference for us in that department. I think all of the players know exactly what to expect. I mean, they should have done last time, to be fair, but I think complacency is not something we can allow ourselves at all this season. And whilst I don't think we were as complacent as people said we were in the games against West Ham and Liverpool, I think nerves played a part there. But if we cannot get 3 points against an Everton side who have only scored in 1 match this season so far, an Everton side where the fans have had Sean Dyche now for another 6 months, new owners are being promised, but that could take a while. There is a flatness about them. Both of the home games they've gone to so far this season have been hugely disappointing. And although I think Beto and Danjuma could inject a little bit of something into that team, I really think that with Declan Rice and Zinchenko in the middle of the park, Zinchenko inverting could either move forward and be covered by Declan Rice, which gives us extra threat and a defensive and tightness in defence. Or it could go the other way, and we saw in the game against Man United, Declan isn't afraid to push up a little bit. So I think that overall, I would expect us to load that right-hand side. Saka and Odegaard interchanging really well there, with Ben White overlapping and underlapping, could be just too much for the left-hand side. And if we pull them slightly if we pull their defence to the left, of course, gaps open up on their right-hand side. We do have something to prove here. We do have to show that we can go away to teams who are prepared to sit back and defend and cede possession and create chances. We have not done that significantly this season. But I am fully confident. Of course I am. No such thing as curses. There's no such thing as curses. I'm expecting us to win 2-0 or 3-0. If I had to say, I'm going to say 2-0. Seems like a fair bet. I don't see them scoring against us. Although, kiss of death, that, isn't it? Beto, who I haven't really seen much of, could be the difference. Dan Juma, as I said earlier. Anyway, dying to know what you think. Looking forward to tomorrow's 12:30 kickoff. Looking forward to match of the day. Looking forward to proper football again. So I'm looking forward to a Sunday evening celebrating 13 points from a possible 15. And here's what I really think as well. Tomorrow, when Manchester City travel to London Stadium for their game against West Ham, I know everyone's got this down as 3 points for them, but West Ham have been really good so far this season. David Moyes has a bit of his mojo back. Is it possible? Could it be that they drop maybe 2, maybe 3 points? Which would mean, of course, that we might be ahead of them. And once we get ahead this season, let's stay there, eh? Anyway, I'm dying to know what you think. If you feel like I've picked the teams wrong, I think pretty much picked themselves. Anyway, let me know in the comments if you agree with the lineups I've predicted, the score I've predicted. I want to hear from you. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching this far. Since you have watched this far, just to let you know that we are about 38 subscribers short of our first goal, which is 500, which is, well, feels like would be a huge achievement, and I would love it if you would join me in this journey. Hit that subscribe button, be regularly updated, and if you did like the video, then does it hurt to click like? Anyway, till I see you again, be lucky, lots of love.